very similar experience.
So, you know, I can get a good laugh out of like bad guys being stupid and just catching them and how we've done that. I don't want to just so fire with a bunch of investors. So, through those travels, I probably connected with 15, 20 folks locally who were on our /teams, and then I said, okay, between that and finding before I got here, I could probably pull enough strings to get 30 people out. And then I think the manager, what is her name? Therese, yes. She pushed out the invite to, I think, ISSA and a few others. And we wound up like 65 people, so it worked out.
Especially for technical.
Yeah, so I think our content was a bit over what most people were comfortable with, so I had one of the Alassian guys chat on Noah's query, one of our guys chatted on kind of like automated fishing responses, and then one of the local antivirus Berkeley. They're out of Boston, but they have a WeWork presence. I had one of their researchers talk through like they have passions, so I kept finding what do I do next. So those are all pretty.
I guess the content got into my team. It's actually quite my arm. That would mean that if I used it that way, we'd be happy.
Yeah. So I'm planning on trying to split back up in probably late October. So I have funding to do. Basically, I want to put in the budget, so we have enough to do one event in both locations. Luckily, I have a researcher out and handle 90% of that to make sure it's paid, which is great. But here, I'm doing a little more than like work. I'll probably just keep it. I'll probably just spam everybody's link last time and say, here's a new link. It's the only email you're gonna get from us. I did threaten to send a survey that didn't have an hey. Yeah.
Hi,
Still
Byron.
Nice to meet you. Manage the Austin office.
Yep.
Wow.
Cool.
Yes, he's kind of dropped me in the hot seat here.
Yeah, I was gonna tell somebody.
Yeah, well, actually, it's one of the startups here who I have to. I don't see him here yet, but he's the one who kind of like, oh, I just a one name drop. Then run away. But yeah, so no, it was a good little event. So I haven't. There's a couple more. Like I tried. I went to like the first regard IT thing, but I had to. Like,
I know exactly what you're saying.
Hey, do you want to go and move or shake?
I know Justin. Sure.
The only stuff that's moderate is just very deep.
it's also a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, but it's like the atmosphere is a little bit intimidating. Especially anybody who's junior or isn't confident.
That is an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much inch deep. And then there's not a lot of forward-leaning organizations from what I've seen in terms of like talking tactics, techniques, etc. And then everybody wants to talk about Excel.
And you know, when I was in one business,
Hey, Robbie. What's up, man? Are we still neighbors?
Well, no, I'm on the second one.
Ah, right. Okay.
Office 620 Palmer.
Oh, okay, so we're close.
We're close. How are things going with you?
Pretty good.
So what's your next event?
No, I still spend about.
Yeah, so when I ran the first one, I suddenly got like 12 offers to host the next one. And I was like, I'm not
Time
trying to
here, still run the fund and still run the accelerators and
soak for a year and
boards
one quarter and get a routine.
most of my time's centered around here. Yeah.
You're in cybersecurity company.
Yeah, I mean, if someone else wants
Oh,
to try,
okay.
And you're doing the
you guys are
programs
like
on Strong.
every other month thing,
Is your
sure,
tiny
but
homes?
Yeah.
even just looking at all the events going on, like trying to pick a day that doesn't keep and all that.
Oh my gosh.
You're the Airbnb.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Hey, we'll catch up.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, so there's a very large trust group having an event in early November, right on top of the last one.
last one talks, we have also helping with running the conference.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the leadership meetings you made,
You know, it's fun. I know what you're.
yeah, and most of what I we're working on just to optimize there's keys, there's the banks, there's the account numbers, which that much more kind of like.
Right, good.
So, but yeah, I got you. So, but yeah, I'm trying to help.
All right, I'm ready if you guys are.
Yeah, it's a recruiting.
Welcome everybody, especially welcome to those of you that haven't been to Capital Factory before.
Do you guys need any guest Wi-Fi codes? Will you raise your hand?
Raise your hand if you need a guest Wi-Fi code for tonight.
Perfect, great.
No? Good. My name's Gordon Doherty. I'm one of the managing directors here at Capital Factory. I look after our Startup Accelerator program, and I'm a general partner in our venture fund. So I spend a lot of my time here. So what we've got today is our part of our Working for Giants series, looking at corporate startup programs and working with large organizations. And tonight the theme is cybersecurity. So I'm going to be your host for the panel. Got Ben and Philip here joining me. Ben from Box and Philip from the advisory board company. Ryan from Microsoft often hosts this event, but he's in an airplane somewhere that got delayed. He's making his way back to Austin. So you guys are stuck with me as the moderator. And what we're talking about is working with giants, large corporations. We're fortunate here at Capital Factory in that on the one hand we have 850 entrepreneurs that work here from Capital Factory, and in the Startup Accelerator program that I look after, we've got about 150 startups, 300 to 400 entrepreneurs. So we spend a lot of our time working with startups and entrepreneurs, but we're also fortunate on the other hand to engage with corporations through sponsorships. Many of them want to connect with the startup community and entrepreneurs for a variety of different reasons, such as the two guys that we have here with us. So, you know, this is just a subset of the corporations that we work with that are sponsors or have special offers that are extended to our startup community. Now, when large corporations engage with us, they do that in a variety of different ways. They're looking to engage with the startup community, but they offer different things. Sometimes it's in-kind services, sometimes it's free and discounted stuff. Mentoring, we have a lot of our corporate sponsors do mentoring and advisory office hours here in the kitchen, which is really great. They might give office space, maybe there's investment dollars, all kinds of different ways that they can offer value to the startup community. And we're going to hear from these guys kind of how they fit into that and what it is that they offer. We've also got this cool thing going on here with Austin. I've been in Austin for 23 years and of course seen it change quite a bit over that time. And every week, every day, every week there's cool stuff going on. Just this morning, as it turns out, you might have seen in the news, but our U.S. Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, was here, not just here in Austin, here at Capital Factory. Believe me, we had 30 to 40 Secret Service team members wandering around. But they made a big announcement that the Department of Defense is bringing their innovation program called DIUX to Austin. So they had one in Silicon Valley, had one in Boston, announced that Austin was going to be the third leg of that stool. And so now the Department of Defense is bringing an innovation program. Their innovation program actually facilitates entrepreneurs and startups directly engaging with the Department of Defense. So if you've ever tried to sell into the military, really any government agency, but especially the military, it's unbelievably difficult. Time consuming. If you're a startup and that's your business plan to go sell to a DoD agency, if you don't raise a lot of money, you're probably going to die before you ever get the first sell. Well, this is what the DIUX is all about. They have expedited contracting. They have done 5 or 6 deals already, and their average time to close those deals is less than 60 days. From pitch to money transferred in the bank account. It just absolutely blew my mind. I started my career at IBM, and I sold to the military. I had the Army and the Navy as customers, and so that was decades ago. But to fast forward now and to see, our military have an innovation initiative like that is really pretty cool, and to have that represented here in Austin is a really big deal. So it's fresh on my mind because it just happened this morning, but just an example of, why you're in a really cool place for those of you that I assume most of you live in Austin. All right, so we've got some guests. We'll thank Ryan virtually. He's usually here, very active in this regard. Microsoft has a special offer, a perk for startups, those that work here at Capital Factory, for the Microsoft BizPark offering. So any of you that happen to work here as members, you're going to want to check that out in our online system or talk to one of the Capital Factory staff members to take advantage of that. Or for those of you that are considering a work membership here, just know that Microsoft has something special as a perk, as do our other corporate sponsors. Ben is here from Box, so I thought just kind of in order, we'll have each of our guests talk a little bit about, we all know who Box is, but just give us a recap of Box. Talk a little bit about, you saw that slide of the different types of offerings that organizations typically have for entrepreneurs and startups. What kind of things does Box do for the startup community? And then maybe just a couple words about Austin's presence that you have here, anything special about Austin for Box?
Sure. So I lead the security operations group at Box, and let's see, we've had an office in Austin just over 2 years now,
Okay.
and I think we've just crested about 150 people here. So we've gone from a very small group to a pretty substantial footprint pretty quickly. We actually just wrapped up our developer conference and user conference out in San Francisco, and that's all kind of introduced you to the product. So our kind of initial offering was the classic collaboration kind of content collaboration where you have files and content you want to share with other folks. You want to do that preferably securely without attaching lots of emails, etc. You want to see who accessed what when. You want revision control. We were able to get you that, but also make sure you had all those controls that larger companies really need in terms of compliance and regulatory, and also something like my team holds near to their heart, the security and logs, right? The user conference really that we had is really kind of expanding on the platform side of that, where we built all these really strong auditing controls and security controls, and now you can bake those into your products and your apps so that you don't have to worry about that. So if you're in a healthcare play, you don't have to worry about, does my storage meet all the criteria, right? You can kind of trust that our product is geared for that, and we kind of fit in those pieces. And so one of the ways we interact with startups especially is through kind of that developer range of our API service and our contact platform, where you can get to a pretty sizable number of queries per month to do testing and develop that app without any kind of cost involved. So I know there was also a hackathon that went on there. There was a pretty substantial prize that was given out for a 24-hour, like, what can you create? So those types of engagements are kind of where we're focused on. Let's see, I covered 2 of the questions, I think.
No.
And then in Austin, we have a kind of interesting footprint office-wise. So my team is there. We're about 11 people. So we started as both a blended network operations and security operations team. Security operations has definitely grown a little substantially faster. So we do your classic incident response, threat monitoring. We also assist the user services, as we call them, is your classic tier 1, 2, 3 support. We're very engaged with them as customers have security questions or concerns. And then we also have some of our back office ITs, finance, etc. And then lastly, we have a decent sales contingent and a technical consulting group who goes on site or helps folks kind of roll out our solution in a way that makes sense for their kind of unique needs.
Great. All right. Thanks, Ben. And you guys will get a chance to ask questions here in just a second. Appreciate that. All right, and Philip's here from the advisory board company. Same kind of thing. Tell us a little bit what the company is all about, offerings for startups, maybe special programs, and a little bit about your Austin presence.
Sure. So advisory board does research, consulting, and technology for healthcare and higher education. So mostly hospitals and universities are our customers. But I run the security operations team for the company and have an inward focus. So rather than the company kind of sounds like an outward facing consulting group, and certainly we have people that do that. My team looks inward and protects member data for healthcare data and higher education data. Advisory board does have a substantial corporate development arm that is working with startups on a regular basis, or in particular in the security space, exploring opportunities. And so that can mean investment dollars, that can mean acquisition, that can mean a lot of things. As a matter of fact, the reason why we have an Austin office is because about 10 years ago, we bought a company in the healthcare space by the name of Crimson here that has grown since then to be our second biggest office. Our headquarters in DC, and our second biggest office is here in Austin. Lots of developers, lots of activity in terms of being involved in the technology community here in Austin. For our kind of security specific work though too, we reach out, and here in the Austin office, it's largely me, we reach out to local community to mentor potential companies in the cybersecurity space as either companies that are to be either a potential vendor, or a customer rather of the company, which is how we're working with a Capital Factory company, vThreat today. We are a customer, and so I'm working with them in terms of a mentoring relationship. We also I don't know whether Capital Factory has a relationship with the Mach 37 accelerator outside of DC, but that's a specific cybersecurity accelerator, and we also have a relationship up there with the companies that work with Mach 37.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, and before we open it up generally for questions, for those of you that would like to engage us more at Capital Factory, you can follow us on Twitter at Capital Factory. We sometimes have what are called epic office hours here. Those are usually themed. So if you see us announce an epic office hours, we usually have 20, 30, maybe 40 mentors and advisors in a room that you can directly engage with, even if you don't have a work membership here at Capital Factory. Damon Klingscale runs the Austin Open Coffee Club, which is a really cool place to meet other entrepreneurs and mentors and angel investors around town. You can email us at frontdesk@capitalfactory.com. Talk to Desmond or myself. We'd love to engage you. So now to open up for questions, kind of anything goes. Cybersecurity is the theme, so we can geek out a little bit on cybersecurity with these guys. If you've got questions about industry trends or things that they're doing there, you could talk about what it's like to be a customer of theirs, what it would be like if you were to try and sell some of your stuff maybe to them. I've got a lot of corporate background. I've spent about half of my time in Fortune 500 companies. The other half of my time has been startups and early stage high growth companies. You're welcome to ask me any questions about Capital Factory or venture funding or things like that. So kind of anything goes. Questions? Anybody?
Gordon, I have
Yes,
a question about the accelerator.
Sure.
You mentioned some of the benefits are surfer credits. I saw on the website there's different companies offering credits. It was up to $500,000. Is that for a company? Would that be they get to choose which provider to $500,000, or is that for all the providers in total?
Yep, good question. Yeah, so one of the financial benefits of the Capital Factory Accelerator is free hosting credits from 4 or 5 of our partners. And the $500,000 essentially is if you added up all of the total value that they're putting on the table and found a way to exercise all of that somehow, maybe sequentially or overlapping, it's unlikely that any individual company would exercise, $500,000. You probably couldn't spend $500,000 on hosting, in a couple of years anyway. Some of them are in the range of $25,000 to $50,000. Some of them are $100,000 to $150,000. So what we usually find is some of the offerings, some startups are already hosting on Amazon or already hosting with Google or Rackspace or one of our partners. So they'll basically kind of apply to try and get that free for a year or two. Other ones might be influenced to switch to another hosting provider because either they don't care or their technology is agnostic enough that they can move it over here and maybe get $100,000 of free hosting. I know, for example, the Amazon offer, there's 2 different offers, and one of them is specifically for big data companies that are going to consume, a lot of data, and that one's valued, I think, at $100,000 for 1 year.
Thank you.
Yep, good question.
So I have a question.
Hey.
For the attendees, who all is working in a cybersecurity startup today? Assuming everybody, but no, not even. Okay, wow.
A third, yeah.
All right. So what space? Like endpoint technology, network stuff, threat intel? What are you doing?
We do contextualized security as a platform.
Okay. Are there other hands that were raised? What are kind of folks working in what area of cybersecurity?
Geosecurity to
Yeah,
two-factor.
sure, of course.
Well, we're in healthcare and we have a lot of patient data.
Awesome. Yeah.
We're helping boards take away liability
Okay.
using the NIST framework.
Yeah, awesome.
Financial reg tech, so dealing with regulatory compliance of
Yeah.
financial institutions.
Yeah. Awesome.
I have a question. My company's been doing book publishing and HR training and stuff, and they've moved into cybersecurity as far as training base level.
Okay,
And you were
yeah.
talking about being internalized.
Yeah.
Do you train your employees for their online behaviors, or you engineer around to keep them from creating problems?
Absolutely. So I'll go first, and once you go next, Ben. So, I mentioned earlier we work in the healthcare space. We also work in higher education, but healthcare is much more has many more regulations, not as much as financial, but many more than there are in the higher education space. And so we're required absolutely to train our employees. Now, depending on the size of the company or depending on what is going on, sometimes we'll farm that out, or sometimes different companies will buy training from other folks. Generally, we do our training all internal, so we'll develop it in-house, we'll deliver it in-house, and everything. But we've explored other opportunities in the past. We have both our kind of security specific, our kind of practical guidance for employees, as well as something of our mandated regulatory style training, which we do absolutely farm out to, we purchase, right? Because that stuff is a bit more rote and boring. So we let somebody else do that, and not my team, but the other half of our security team works on delivering that training on a regular basis.
Yeah, I was to say we're kind of similar in those regards. So one of the kind of interesting things about my career has been in kind of enterprise cloud solutions. We tend to collect certifications and regulatory requirements, kind of like Flare. If they're out there, we try and get them. They all have different views on what training means and how to implement it. And so we have a compliance team of full-time folks who are dedicated to ensuring that what we're doing kind of meets those requirements. So the security team itself has a internal position on what we'd like customers or kind of employees to know.
Mm-hmm.
But from the day one you're in the door at our company, you're going to get a briefing on security, right? We store other people's stuff, right? And so it's a culture add that you have to bring to the table. At the same time, we're a very forward-leaning company. We're very fast-moving. We try and catch our employees when they fall rather than prevent them, right? And so we try and be open and flexible and kind of largely invisible on the day-to-day work side of it. So there's definitely a in upfront like company-wide training that we'll do where we'll try and keep it light and humorous and kind of keep folks in the understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And then there's definitely the dry side of it where we have to check a box. There's no way around it, and we definitely do kind of farm that out.
I appreciate the perspective you added in terms of letting employees, not necessarily preventing them from doing everything, because it reminded me of the other half of your question. And we do something very similar. 1/3 of my team is detection, right? So going to look for bad actors or bad stuff that's going on, or employees making mistakes, usually not purposefully. And so while we do actually, I don't know about as much as Box, but certainly similar to what Ben was describing, we have preventative things. We have stuff that to try to keep everybody falling down in line. We definitely look for everything and don't depend on training to cover the rest of that. Yeah.
Good question. What else?
I have a question. Can you give an example of small startup companies that you have worked with and how you've worked with them and how they've benefited and how it's benefited you,
Yeah.
your organization?
So I mentioned a few minutes ago that we work with vThreat, which is a Capital Factory company, and also it was also part of the Mach 37 Accelerator as well. Marcus Carey, the founder, is a good friend of mine. And so me specifically, I run the technical team in our security group, so we're always looking for interesting technology to implement to protect our member data in efficient or new ways, just as much as the bad guys are moving quickly and can in some sense are far ahead of what teams like myself can implement. We're looking for generational leaps in technology so that we are doing things on par pace-wise with how the bad guys are advancing. And so vThread is a good example of a company that has an interesting offering that for me provides a way for us to keep track of some of the activities of our employees or some of the state of our systems. Speak of the devil, there he is right there, Marcus Carey. vThread gives us an opportunity to deliver interesting information up to my boss and up to his boss that can give a vision into what we're doing. So I have a good, decent knowledge of what my team is implementing in terms of defensive technology, but the farther up we go in the management chain, in terms of the size of the company, the less information they have in terms of how effective or what exactly we're doing, right? Because technical information seems to just disappear the higher up you go in the management chain. So what we're trying to do is do a better job of testing for all that stuff and informing folks as to what we're doing and how effective it is.
How did you come together and decide what component that they would bring?
Marcus gave me a call. We seriously went to breakfast and we had a discussion about, listen, here are my pain points in terms of what my team is, the problems we're trying to solve, and the technologies we're trying to implement. Here's what works. Here's what I have trouble communicating up to my boss's boss is our general counsel or chief legal officer, and he of course reports to the board. So I have a real challenge in trying to figure out what he's interested in and what he wants to know, and then what the board of directors wants to know. So.
Yeah, so I'd say we have kind of similar stories. We've worked with a number of startups, I would say both successfully and unsuccessfully. So I want to be kind of upfront that it's not always an easy interaction, and there's a reasonable amount of risk for us when we do get involved, right? Because it's a large time investment, which is our most precious commodity. It's almost like the dollars are easier. So I worked directly with two, maybe three I'll talk to. So one, Duo, is something we utilize internally pretty heavily, and you know, I would wager most of you wouldn't call them a startup anymore, but we've been using them for quite a long time, and they kind of looked at the two-factor problem of, here's a physical token, I need a way to know that the human typing on this keyboard is the human I want to be typing on this keyboard. And they said, how do I make that accessible so I'm not paying for thousands of physical tokens to be shipped out that run out of battery, that I lose sync from the server? And they made it so that I can send a notification to that person's phone and they can push, yes, that's me. And so that was their initial product offering. And then we say, okay, so tell us how we can interact with the product beyond just your UI, right? Like, one of the things I come very strongly to customers with, and Marcus got a bit of this when we chatted with him, was give me your API, give me your documentation. You do not have those, we don't really have a conversation. Because the UI side of it is always very pretty, right? And that's kind of what everybody shows you. But I have 35 consoles for my team, and we're not logging into all of them. There's just no way, right? So you
in terms of security products, 35 different, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
across corporate environments, production environments, customer environments, and there's no way for my team to log into all these things. So your product has to kind of fit in our ecosystem. And so the first thing I say is, how can we integrate you in? Where is your value add? And how do we do that? So for Duo, for example, I can say, we can say, I want to initiate that check anytime I want. It doesn't have to be a pre-built piece that Duo knows about. And we might come back to them later and say, hey, here's this interesting piece that we implemented, but they're just providing that core functionality and we're innovating on top of it. And so that to me is kind of a real requirement when we interact with companies, is that they have really strong API, and that they're thinking about the development process in the code I'm writing is agnostic to how it's being interacted with. It's not in one use case that you've thought up. It can be applied by the team that's consuming it. So I guess I'll give another example. Is a company that is actually out of the Mach 37 project. Securities is a company that does a incident response tool, and they're working on it. It's called IR Flow. And so one of the biggest challenges for security operations teams is you have to have a system of record that your auditors will want to know about, that your board will want to know about, to say, when you've had an incident, where have you documented? What's your timeline look like? Did you bottom out all the different pieces? Who was involved? And for me as a security leader, I want to know, how quickly did we contain it? How quickly did we triage it? which of our tools are slowing us down, which of our tools are speeding us up, where do I need to invest? And if you look at the ticketing systems out there, none of them are built for security teams, right? So what you wind up with is a lot of security teams taking whatever ticketing system happens to be in their org already and hacking on it.
You are describing an exact pain point of my team.
And hacking on it.
We're building it in-house.
Right, and so for my team, I have 3 full-time people who modify things for us to make them work the way we want. That is not the norm, right? The majority of companies who are not in hugely funded and huge, need something that drops and works. And so in that scenario, right, again, very early on, I said, your API has to be really strong, right? But at the same time, you need to be evolving, and flexible. So that product for us was a way for us to really influence the development from that initial vision of, here's a ticketing system purposed for your world, and then say, well, I know what my world looks like today, and I also know where it's going. So let's make sure that your roadmap and my roadmap are aligned. And so as they've gotten bigger, they now have more inputs from customers that they've landed, and so their roadmap is obviously diverging from ours directly. But that initial, probably 2.5 year where they were going from idea to proof of concept to functional product, we very much influenced them on why can that field not be edited? Or if it is edited, it has to have a history record. And little details like that will get you when you're in a very heavily regulated environment. So those are the kind of nuances that a functional team will bring to the startup that you just won't have unless your day-to-day have done it. And I think that's usually why that relationship is very valuable.
So Philip, let's riff on that just a little bit more, because I think it's really valuable for this audience. Ben touched on some of essentially the pros and cons of working with a startup and early stage company, right? On the positive side, you're getting really innovative early looks at stuff, but on the other hand, it maybe is not as mature as it might need to be to implement in your organization or another one. How do you think about the pros and cons, and what advice would you give these that are working on early stage ventures how to think about that?
Well, so I think the most valuable thing from my standpoint is getting a chance to sit down with somebody who is interested in hearing what my actual the pain that I'm actually feeling on my team and I'm actually trying to solve, because most often what happens in working with the larger companies is they've already answered the question of what problem they're trying to solve. They already know, and they're trying to fit it into the little small box. They're trying to fit their square peg into my round hole.
Yeah.
When in fact, when I'm working with a smaller company, there's a lot more flexibility in terms of me describing exactly the problem I'm trying to solve, and then figuring out. And they still have to make, the startup still has to make a decision. The company still has to make a decision whether that's some work they want to do. But there's a lot more opportunity to make that shift and to make that change and be flexible. So I think that flexibility is the biggest pro. From a con standpoint, I think the pain of working with a startup is that the scale just usually isn't there in terms of the variety of problems that can be solved. Now, in security, that's probably not necessarily a big con, because I'm not really sure exactly what Ben's approach is, but most of the teams that I work with in terms of peer organizations across the country or the world are identifying the approach that Ben was basically describing, that point solutions or directed or targeted solutions are really the way to solve security problems these days. Whether you're plugging them together with your own team or with other glue style things as well, there are a lot of very small or very directed problems that bad guys are taking advantage of, holes that they're exploiting. And we don't need some sort of massive, all-knowing, all-seeing eye to stop it. What we need are very specific tools for very specific holes or very specific problems. And so if we can take a bunch of those and put them together, now this necessitates a team that kind of knows what they're doing, and our teams know what they're doing. So this is not everybody, but that's how companies, anything larger than say a couple hundred employees, are going to solve any security problems these days. They're going to plug a bunch of small things in to plug those gaps in the dam, to plug those holes. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, fabulous.
I have a question. You mentioned that you'd also had some unsuccessful experiences with startups, and I was just curious, is there a common set of pitfalls that a startup could fall for when interfacing with a bigger business that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so, let's see, so two of the unsuccessful, what I would consider unsuccessful was where we, if we've got into a POC with someone and then we haven't bought your product, that to me is unsuccessful, especially if we've invested in time into racking servers, getting network connections set up, et cetera. Like that, to us, like that, in our organization, you don't just drop the box in and plug it in and hope it goes well, right? There's a process there and multiple teams are involved, right? So we've spun up a project, someone is managing that, and that's an investment. So for us, the first example of that was just where the product initially to us seemed like a really good fit, and then the momentum just stopped, right? We got, literally the person interacting with us was the one who was doing some code work, giving us new things. We got, very quick response times, and then suddenly no releases, no releases, no releases, no releases. 6 months later, we're still on the exact same product we started with, and everything is this next 2.0, which will solve all our problems. And we have this problem internally too. Team will be like, hey, 2.0 is coming, don't worry about that 1.0 bug. It doesn't matter if it's burning 30 minutes every day, right? 2.0 will solve all your problems. So I would say if you are doing some type of refactor like that, you cannot leave your mentors or your initial customers hanging. And if you do, you need to be really vocal about why and what's going on. There can't be that visibility gap. And so for us, even when 2.0 came, the trust had been lost, right? And so whatever internally happened there, and I know they went through a funding round, they had some staffing changes, you can't start with, if you start with a velocity and then suddenly drop it on the floor, you will lose the trust of that relationship, and it would be impossible to kind of build it back up. So that was one example. The second example was really not a fault of that company. They just made a strategic decision to focus on a different area. So we started interacting with a company called Threat Quotient. They do threat indicator management. When we started implementing our threat intelligence program, we said we wanted to focus on our internal indicators first. And that meant the focus had to be the analysts looking at a problem, had to be able to take information out of that problem, put it into a system we could use, and then in the future, we would know that we'd seen it before, what it was, right? If it came back again, we'd know that link would be there. And their focus was on pulling in external information, right, from other feeds and enriching our data. And we just decided that our focus was internal first, and we wanted to get that process very robust before we went and pulled in external. And they had decided that they believed the market was looking for external. And so that was just a dividing path, and we may come back around when we're ready to do that. But it was just a, I think our visions have slightly misaligned here. And so, we like what you're doing, but we have a different need right now. And so while we are a big company, we try and keep on very singular goals, so you don't wind up getting nothing done. So those are the two examples.
What else?
So I have a comment. I've worked with these guys a lot, and I haven't sold anything in the box yet. But what's cool about the whole situation is that Ben is really awesome. If you can get these guys in your network, both of these guys, it's not about sales, it's about relationships, and they've helped me out a lot. I mean, he's always kicking my butt. He's always kicking my butt, and I just keep Ben in my network. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sell anything in the box, but that doesn't matter. I just like to listen to them and see what problems they're experiencing, and it's been great. I get a lot of good feedback.
For folks developing technologies in the cybersecurity world, there are a lot of groups or a lot of companies that kind of decide that they've cracked the nut, they've solved the problem, and they kind of go off and do it. Maybe it's because they're coming from previous experience, but whenever I then assess or take a look at the technology they've built, whether it's part of a larger company or a smaller offering that appears on the market, that's announced and we explore, what inevitably kind of comes from that is, did you really sit down with anybody as you were building this, like an actual implementation team, a team that would have to take this technology and make something work day to day? Because it really, oftentimes, the ones that fail for me, which is the majority, certainly not the minority of the people we actually work with, but the majority of the tools in cybersecurity these days are either solving the exact same problem as somebody else, or with the slight, marketing twist, right? But effectively, from my team's purposes, the exact same product as A, B, or C. And so if that team or if that group might have the developers or the designers or the architects might have sat down with an actual operational team to figure out how they work day to day, how they're trying to really find those bad guys or hunt internally or prevent effectively or prevent something effectively, then they might have figured that out a lot sooner than before building the marketing engine for a product and trying to sell something that they're just going to struggle.
Yeah, definitely echo the sentiments. I will. I try to stay out of the cynical side of security because it's a rabbit hole that you can't get out of. But security folks in general are skeptical about solutions, right? And so, I with a company that is definitely not a startup, when we didn't go with them, they came back and said, would you spend 30 minutes just helping us understand like what went wrong, right? And it was more than just like why I didn't pick it. It was like, when we send you emails, are those useful, right? And they probably didn't like many of my answers, but understanding that they're selling to a unique piece, part of a company that is trained to be suspect of solutions and trained to be, kind of going that extra mile and vetting it, and really understanding like someone has done that at least once before you're going in front of a bigger name is really helpful. Also, I call it kind of tunnel vision, right? It's like you kind of figure out your solution and then you get heads down into that solution, and by the time you come up for air, the ground has changed around you. And I think with the pace of how fast the technology moves today, it's really, if you kind of are trying to solve for a huge problem, and you're doing that kind of, you might be iterating quickly, but from the customer hands-on, it's basically your waterfall model all over again. Getting that very base functionality and then having someone validate it works and then iterating quickly is so much more valuable than saying, as I mentioned with that 2.0 problem, than saying the world is going to be solved as soon as I get this to you, just hang on a little longer.
I think this is a good topic. I'd be curious, maybe start with Philip and then move to Ben. Within the overall security discipline, if you look at the sub-practices, which areas do you think are most ripe for or most desperate for innovation? Like your wish list, your magic wand.
Sure. Well, I can tell you what we're focusing on right now. So I don't know that I have a magic wand because that's a dangerous thing in security. As soon as somebody builds it, the bad guys figure out a way around it, and my wand is worthless. Yeah. So because we can point at the history of security technology. That was a magic wand. That was a magic wand. That was a magic wand. Yeah. What we're working on internally in our team is endpoint focused stuff. So for the uninitiated, what that means is that your workstation, your laptop, or even your phone or tablet, those are the target for the bad guys these days, vast majority. Certainly people attack applications. I do have another 1/3 of my team is my application security team. We definitely try to build applications securely, and if you have that pain point, if you have that problem in your organization, you just want a shoulder to cry on, feel free to give me a call, because we're definitely trying to solve that problem in our own organization and struggling, and I can give you pointers and guidance. But really these days the target is your machine, and I don't mean like your server. I mean your employee machine. You are the target by far of any bad guy out there. You are the foothold or the beachhead into your organization, and then from that it is trivial, whether you're on the corporate network or not, it is trivial to use your credentials or to use your data to move laterally or horizontally or whatever through your organization and get to something that's interesting to the bad guys. Our hunt team on a regular basis, just out of perhaps morbid fun, responds to an email or clicks a link or answers a phone call of a known bad guy, something we know is bad, fires it up on a special lab machine that's not connected to anything in the corporation, and waits for how long it takes for an actual person to log into the machine and start doing something. And it's under an hour these days. If you're clicking a link in an email, it's a trivial amount of time before somebody is actually poking around your system and trying to figure out if they want to spend any more time on it, or if they want to sell it to somebody else who will definitely want to spend time on your machine. So we're definitely focused on endpoint stuff and on trying to slow the attacker down. We can't stop anybody, but we can slow them down enough to find them and kick them out.
And are you seeing, before Ben, are you seeing anything innovative in the endpoint area though, Philip? I mean, like, is there
Yeah,
hope? I mean,
yeah,
you don't have to
yeah.
name
Well,
names,
so
but just
no,
like-
I will name names because it's open source technology and anybody can go pull it down. But Ben mentioned OS Query. To me, we were talking about another event or something a little while ago. But the tool that Facebook built in open source a year and a half ago, maybe I think.
Yelp and Facebook, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's called OS Query, and we're taking a look at that. We have some other stuff that we're using internally, but the vast majority of what we do is we turn up logs on Windows machines because those are the biggest target, and we look for very specific indicators on those machines using data mining tech. So we're not really deploying security purpose-built technology. OS Query is a tool that's purpose-built for security, but all it really does is look for certain indicators or certain things that you tell it to look for, and it flags that up to my team, and my team then hunts and goes to look specifically. So we are specifically not going for any of what might be called the bigger products or the magic wands in security these days, because none of it's really interesting anymore to us. We're actually trying to look for the bad guys.
Ben, what's on your innovation wish list?
Yeah, so the model we work with is protect first, detect second, and respond third, right? So we pretty much presume protection is going to fail, right? What we really can't afford to have is detection fail. So my team is pretty hyper focused in the actual detection, but if you have detection, you inevitably have to respond. Because if you know there's a problem and you don't respond, then you're grossly negligent and get sued. So the response piece is what you actually have to build first, right? So we have, over the last couple of years, really gotten our response team beefed up and capable, and so now the detection piece is becoming just naturally more focused on, because when you have 6 to 8 really smart responders and you don't have a lot of data for alerts, suddenly they go start finding things.
Yep.
So that's kind of the model we're looking at. I would say Box, the reason a lot of startups have trouble interacting with Box is because we have a pretty unique corporate environment. We're something like, I want to say 80+% max internally, and the classic security model is Windows heavy, and the classic attacker model is Windows heavy. But to take a little bit of a step back, kind of what you mentioned on they're after you or they're going to sell yours, we try and step back a bit and say, what are we trying to solve for? What is the motivations of the attacker? What is the threat model that we're solving for? And a lot of startups, when they come to us with where we're solving this or we're solving that, they're solving for like the NSA coming after us, right? And it's just not a threat model I care about, right? You could get there with enough dollars and time, right? You could protect yourself against that, and Apple and other companies are investing like that, right? But when you look at your kind of, nation state level, your average company is not, that's not their problem, right? If a foreign nation state is after you, you're just not going to be able to handle that, right? You need to go get help from our nation states, right? And go that direction, right? But what you can be solving is the really lowest level of, like, every day you get an email saying, please send, I have $1 million for you, all I need is $500 to get the transfer going, right? You may have seen in the news where your CEO or your CFO will get an email saying from a very closely, or your finance person will get an email from a typo domain and say, I need a wire transfer within the next hour to this place for 10 grand, right? Here's the bank information, right? That's a solvable problem, right? And those kind of making yourself not a target of opportunity for what we call crimeware, right, is probably 80% of what the first task is. And if you get above that 80%, you are so far beyond what most companies can do, then you can start worrying about the last 20. But moving the needle past that 80% is incredibly expensive and incredibly difficult. And if you're targeting that as a startup, understand that the number of competent security teams that can get there are really small. So if it sounds great and it's super sexy in emails and you can get your C-suite interested, but at the end of the day, you're not improving your posture if you haven't gotten your basics done, if you don't have good inventory control, if you don't have good network control, if you don't have good logging and accounting of what's going on, you haven't solved those basics, right? What's the point of having the most advanced network monitoring, right? They're not going to use, the criminals are just as lazy as we are. They're going to do the least amount of effort to get into your environment, and if they can get in with an old vulnerability you didn't patch, that's what they're going to use, right? So when we kind of talk with startups, we want to see them thinking in that same model, that they're looking to get us to a certain point, or they recognize where they're shooting for and why that's relevant to us as an organization. So,
Questions? Yeah.
How do you test your whatever protections, whether it's the endpoint protections or just your external facing infrastructure?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple ways. So one, a lot of the compliance controls require it. So we just had our PCI pen test on site 3.5 weeks ago, and we put them in a conference room and say good luck, and we wait and see how long it takes us to detect them, right? And then once that happens, we can say, okay, now you can go full blast and do as loud and as whatever you need to find as much as you can, right? But my analysts don't know that's going on, right? Until it's caught, and sometimes it's like really sad the way they get caught, right? The host name on their system they plugged in is like pentest 01, and I'm like, this is not a good test, guys. So yeah, so there is that, right? And that's kind of like your regulatory force requirement, and that is what your average company is doing because that's the minimum bar. If you have a active kind of application security team, you will probably have folks who have more offensive driven technology kind of skill sets. And for us, I would say until this year probably, we literally took the entire security team, put them in a room and said, attack us, right? Start from scratch, pretend you know nothing, and just break it. And then at the end of that day, we would say, okay, well, let's walk back where we got in, why we got in, did anybody notice, et cetera. So this last couple of years, now that we have a much more robust response team, it's almost a little bit of a catch-22 for us. We want the responders to do attacking, but at the same time, we want the responders to react to attackers. And they can't do that if they're the ones doing the attacking. So we've struggled with that a little bit. And then really the top end, and previously I was at Salesforce, who had literally a full-time red team that did nothing but rotate between their different products and compromise them thoroughly, right? And then say, we'll be back in 12 months. Let's hope the first 12 of these are not still hanging out there.
So there's a very veritable cornucopia of companies that will do the attacking external to your organization. The larger companies have, like Ben was saying, have internal red teams that do that. What there really isn't a lot of at all, maybe with some exceptions, are tools that you can get that will help you verify your stuff is working. Right. And so that's why it's been interesting to work with Marcus and bthreat, because we can verify that some of the stuff we purchased is working correctly, and it's not just working correctly yesterday and today, but tomorrow we'll test it again, and the day after that we'll test it again. There's almost nothing. I mean, I'm sure you've done some looking. There's almost nothing out there that does that kind of thing. I would much rather continuously test, right, to use developer parlance. I would much rather continuously test my security tools versus the 12-month or the best you can get typically is, unless you're willing to pay a ton of money, is usually quarterly. That tends to strike the balance in terms of larger companies looking for more frequent testing than 12 months for effectiveness versus just checking the box. So is that the kind of question you were looking at getting answered?
Yeah, I'm just curious because I used to work as a security consultant.
Sure.
I was wondering, because you specifically mentioned about the endpoints, which is exactly like every time we did a test, that's exactly how we go in. Of course. Like people would have we get the one guy that had the text file with all the passwords for their AWS, and they didn't have two-factor. But do you get any phishing and that kind of stuff done against you?
Yeah. So if you have an email account, you're getting phished. Yeah. Whether you know it or not.
Well, I mean, deliberately, though, do you hire people to try and phish you?
So there are definitely a couple companies out there now where you can literally just sign up and say, create me a templated phishing email, change a couple of things, hit the send button, and I think Duo has a product actually that's maybe beta or something like that, where you say, here's the, validate you own the domain to start with, and then, pick a theme, give me some email addresses and see who clicks. So we do this against our customer service organization. Hi, I'm a customer. I can't get into my account right now. Oh my God. I need a password now. Reset, right? And we do it against both our offshore support and our internal support to see who's going to turn over a password reset link or who's going to click on that link. Or we'll send an email from their manager, but from a random Gmail account, and say, hey guys, the support portal is updating. Please click here and log in. Right? And so that to us is kind of like looking at who's the most vulnerable to that stuff and giving them some live fire, it definitely will, it gives you a little bit of a challenge too, because suddenly you're gonna start getting a lot of reports about stuff that's not.
How effective has that been?
So this is one of the things I struggle with. I think the industry probably struggles with, like, how effective is security training, right? If you get compromised less, does that mean you were more effective or less effective? Right?
You get this particular instance, and you know who's clicking, you can see them.
Yeah, so-
imagine at first you get locked, and then after you train them, he's smaller and smaller, and
So
it's probably
that's
never
fair.
gonna go away.
Correct, so that's fair. So I would say, you have to, the sophistication level of the fish will change your click-through rate. So depending on how much you exist on social media, I can find out maybe you like golf. I can find out maybe you're part of a golf club. I can buy a domain that's close to that golf club, and I can craft an email that says congratulations.
We're targeting a person instead of a department.
It's
Right.
the same thing though. It's like you narrow or
Sure,
widen it
sure.
accordingly as needed. So if I have a generic fish and no one's getting caught, we're gonna up our game a little bit. So in that regard, you can kind of measure your sophistication. For me, the stats is more relevant how fast I get a report.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is the number of people that need to get a malicious email before my team gets told? And I'd like to see that in the like less than 10 range. Depending on the department, it definitely varies.
So Ben mentioned earlier, but focusing on that detect capability is what we are doing, because we actually, we don't actively test the phishing of our employees. We just find fishes every week and measure those. I'm very serious. I'm very serious. We get fished, on the order of these are the ones we find, right? But on the order of 5 or 6 times a week, give or take, and that's more than say 10 people. And so it's plenty of data for us to measure. And so we've over the last year or so of some of the active measurements we've been doing, our rate has gone down. But let me describe it. I thought about it earlier when you were talking about it. And so just for fun, I'll describe the best one we got this year that we know about. Our CEO actually, so public company, 3,500 or so employees. That's kind of the like 500 million revenue or something. That's kind of the size of the organization, the advisory board. Our CEO got an email that said, "Hey, need you to show up for a subpoena, or you're being subpoenaed. Need you to show up in court next week. Here's the name of the judge. Here's the floor. Here's the building in DC. This is all correct stuff, by the way, too. We verified all this. Here's the reason, et cetera, because you're being sued by such and such company, this or that. The details are in the Word document. Of course, compromised Word document. He didn't open it. He forwarded it to our CEO, to our chief legal officer, and said, "What the hell?" I think that's a quote, by the way. And then he opened it, even though we're talking to him all the time about this. It was a bad day or something, and so we opened it. We were able to stop it soon enough, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But it was very interesting because it was the best targeted thing we've gotten in say the last year or so. But honestly, it was flawless. It was perfect. There was nothing wrong. It was perfect.
We actually have a unique visibility set to this. So we are basically a platform, and you can host files on us, and you can share files using us, and you can create links.
We
can
find
be
a lot of stuff on that's linked to on Box
Yeah,
that's sent to
so
our employees. Sure.
I would say that our business-focused nature does reduce the volume of this stuff, but we get it. So we will sometimes figure out that another company is being fished using our platform, which puts us in a little weird position, which is like, we figured out you're being attacked. You probably don't know. We know X number of your folks have downloaded this.
Sure.
And we also have an interesting privacy kind of problem then too, because we know who signed this account up to some degree. Sometimes they have given us credit card information, which is probably stolen, fraudulent, and so in the case, what we haven't seen yet, thankfully, is where we're seeing like, our product being used against our customers or something like that. And so we're very cognizant of that problem, and it's why the scope of my team is challenging, is because you have that, I need to protect the company that is Box, but I also need to protect the customer using the product. And then I have this general public who interacts with our customers.
So what do you do in that case?
Well, so there's no like silver bullet, right? And it's layering
Shut
of
down
your.
the account or stop the downloads?
Well, yeah. So I mean, we have some built-in protections where if a file becomes hot or is known to be malicious, we're not going to let you share it publicly.
Sure.
You yourself can infect yourself all day long with it. If you're logged in, that's your business. But you're not going to be able to put it in an email and ship it out. We also have a couple technical limitations in play to reduce that stuff, where we don't let certain types of files go out, et cetera. But it adds an interesting twist to it as a service provider that we get inquiries from other teams. If, hey, you've got a link from us, can you give us some indication, is this, what country this has come from, right? And the guys who are signing up for the platform, they're not gonna be as sneaky about what they're doing because they're not expecting my team to find them and talk to the team they targeted. So that introduces like a whole level of complexity, which I haven't seen any startups trying to solve for that, but at the same time.
Sounds like a service offering
There you
opportunity
go.
for me.
But the other challenge is you have to get to a certain size before you start seeing this stuff. It's like one of the reasons we are attracted to Target is because we're very business focused. Our brand is what we're trying to protect, and they're trying to abuse that brand. So if you're not at that level, you may see abuse, but you're not necessarily going to see the abuse that's so targeted, right? You're going to see that kind of generic, kind of everyday. Sometimes not even abuse. It's literally just spam.
Okay. What else?
I have
Go ahead.
a question. It might or might not apply to what you guys do, but I'm trying to develop some real estate, and it's got a lot of sensors with the IoT that come into it. And I went to a meeting last night with GE FedEx, and I'm looking at like platforms, and from your perspective, how is the IoT with all the different sensors and apps that control things and integrate with things? How do you protect against that?
Man, easy
If
question.
you had a whiteboard and could design
Sure.
the system like you talked about earlier and get some, how would you go about it?
So very high level, couple
Exactly.
things.
High.
Yeah, sure. Very high level, couple things. Platform needs to be updatable, right? So the kind of major problem historically, I don't know about going forward, but historically has been that deploy connected devices are either not updated at all or were never designed that way, right? So firmware is effectively stamped when it's shipped and it's done, right? We'll give you the next version if we want to update it. That's not possible anymore. I mean, sure, companies will build it and they'll do that, but going forward, attackers have already compromised those kinds of things and are already using them maliciously against other people. So those things, for the benefit of everybody else in terms of why would that be interesting at all to a bad guy, they would be interesting as resources or assets to use against somebody else. So let's say you're a hacktivist, let's say you're the Russian mob or something, and you want to extort money from somebody else. Well, you can tell all of these 100,000 devices across sensors deployed across the nation attack this one system, right? And then, or not even attack, just like talk to, say hi to this system over here, and then it's done, right? It's over, the bandwidth is exceeded, and you're gone. So, all of those things are attractive in that way. That's pretty much all the way that they're attractive. And so the way you mitigate that, of course, is you have an active security development organization within your company or that you contract with to make sure that the devices are built securely. But you conversely, you also deploy them in a way that you can update them either on the fly or regularly. So from a high level, I would say that those are the two major prongs of your defensive strategy.
Just to follow up on that, is there some sort of a standard that, like new IoT things, maybe Gordon, you see probably a lot of that here with devices, like Echo or something, is there any kind of standard?
So it's interesting, when you ask about IoT, I always think of like the ICSI, the oldest, most hardest to update devices, like your big machinery, is what is finally being addressed, right? There's standards being put in play, there's working groups and et cetera working on these problems where they have really big machinery in factories and say nuclear power plants that were not able to be updated. But it's almost like it hasn't become a crisis yet in the IoT yet. I haven't found a toaster attacking me yet to really force the hand, and the penalty for failure here is just still very low, right? It's higher for some areas. So for example, there are a couple medical device folks out there.
Medtronic's pacemaker.
Yeah, what do you do when your pacemaker is vulnerable to Bluetooth connections?
That's exactly what happened.
Right. You know, it's no longer like a movie thing,
Yeah.
right? Now, have we seen people walking around causing people heart attacks? No.
Yeah.
Not in scale.
Yeah,
right?
in testing, for testing
Sure,
purposes, absolutely.
but not
The
at, like-
the researchers have proven it.
Sure.
But that's it so
But
far.
but it's not like people are not falling over in the
Right.
street because their pacemaker was attacked, right? We're not there yet. So the penalty for failure is not quite dramatic enough yet to force some of that. So depending on what you're building, the understanding what the implication of failure is, like what does your failure mode look like? How do you recover from it? Can the user do that? Is what I would call out as a part of that. It's less about like how secure you are, because you should presume you're gonna have a failure scenario. It's how do you recover from that? And how quickly can you recover from that? And have you planned for that? Have you tested recovering from it, right?
Couple more questions, and then also want to leave a little time for you guys to, meet each other and maybe visit with the guests. Go ahead.
I have another more general question. I mean, you two work in a very security conscious field. So how much of your resources do you spend on doing internal security, and how does it contrast to the general business and where it should be, in your opinion?
I can start with that, just because customers ask us this.
I'll do the math in my head as you go.
Sure. So the high-tech finance field is 2.5% of their employees are focused on security. That number is moving right now up to 3%, and some of the more bigger institutions are 4% of their. So we're not quite at 4%. I think the last time I did this math that you're doing quickly, we were something like 30% as well. Just because as a company we need to match what the high end of the industry is. As you get into companies where failure is less painful, that number drops. So as I said, the failure state is just not painful enough for a lot of companies. That dictates their investment in security. And so the compliance regimes like HIPAA and PCI are attempts to force that movement and investment in some type of standardized way. But from a when do I start investing in security, it's when you typically need to have some initial thought on your architecture layer, and then it's when I have a failure due to security, what is my impact? And that drives your investment decision.
Since I've done the math now, our workforce is on the order of 0.5% of the employee base, right? But a better measurement across companies, in addition to number of people, is amount of percentage of revenue, right? Mm-hmm. So our budget is on the order of 1%. It's a little less than that of revenue. So in terms of payroll and tools and services and this and that. So that's kind of where we fall. Which, to answer a broader question that you had, how do we compare to other people? We're at the high end for a lot of peers, absolutely in the healthcare space, for sure. So if you count us in healthcare, that includes hospitals, right, and systems and things. As much as there's consolidation in the hospital system area, and certainly with payers and insurance providers and things like that, there's a huge gap in terms of capability. There are your Aetnas and Humanas and United Healthcares of the world that have more regulatory burden and so have larger teams, and then there are podunk or smaller hospitals that don't or have nobody, right? And so we're in the middle somewhere. In terms of technology companies, I don't really have a good answer for you because I don't do a lot of comparison across. We do some comparison in the application security space because we are part of some communities that do a broad swath measurement of across technology companies and across vertical markets. How are people investing in application security specifically? Because we have on the order of 30 or 40 large kind of software as a service products that we're selling, and that's how we do our technology selling to hospitals and universities. And so we tend to fall on the higher end of the healthcare vertical and education, but on the lower end of the technology vertical in terms of our investment in application security. So.
Yeah, I would add on to that is we're very well connected with kind of the Silicon Valley security teams, just by the nature of being based there and just being forward-leaning. The larger those companies get, the percentage of investment seems to go up dramatically. I mean, if you look at Google's security team, it could be its own company, right, in size. So you see those larger companies making those bigger dollar investments, but they typically get there late, so to speak. So the early, smaller companies typically are arm twisted into that unless they have a kind of product-based need for it.
I don't know why I haven't mentioned it before, but I'd be remiss to not mention a kind of personal interest of mine, which is the kind of concept of minimum viable security for smaller companies, startup style companies. So if that's something, if you're interested in terms of building your own company, whether you're doing enough, which may be part of your question, I don't know, but it may be part of other people's questions, because there's only 5 or 6 hands that raised of people who are in security companies. So I'm curious why the rest of you are here. But if you're here because you're curious whether your company is doing enough, or doing really what you need to do, right, in the Eric Ries style, minimum viable, right? Well, from a minimum viable product standpoint or minimum viable security, are you doing enough? Let's talk, because I'd be curious to talk with you and see what you think. I can share with you some war stories and some other concepts of things. It's a personal interest, so we can talk offline.
Great topic. Rob?
So do you, when you do business with smaller companies, I'm assuming if you do, is there something, minimum requirements, or do you mandate on small companies?
Yeah, so this is actually a good topic that probably is worth chatting on. So when you run into your first procurement team, and that procurement team has a security review, you are going to get a checklist or a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet is going to be a lot of hard security questions that you probably haven't considered, especially the first time. Yeah. So one of the things that I've done with some of the startups I've helped out is literally just give them our security review checklist and say, by the time we're paying you, you need to have the majority of these boxes checked.
We do the same thing for small companies.
Right?
Yeah, we do the same thing.
And so that checklist just gets longer and more complicated the farther into the mature companies you go, right? And if you get into regular companies, that checklist gets longer, and then they give you 2 copies of it and say, you have a vendor, go give that checklist to your vendor, come back to us with that too. And we get those from our even the largest companies we sell to. One of our differentiators is that we will walk through that with you and explain it in detail. And so, while my team doesn't necessarily handle that, and so we don't necessarily have as deep as visibility, when I interact with a new vendor, I know up front as part of that conversation, there is a decent sized checklist which you need to be checking off everything that applies to you, or at least have good reasoning on why not. And the folks who are going to read through that are going to see through just some really wish-washy answer.
Okay.
And
so how do you corroborate whatever they're saying is, like, how do you testify that what they're doing is the right thing?
Yeah, so there's if you're a large enough company and you're giving us a product that has a high enough risk, we are going to test you. You're going to get pen tested. Your app will get pen tested by us. Like, we have a team that does that. Okay. But what I would say is having every box check is not necessarily the immediate need. It's I understand this requirement. It's on my roadmap. I am able to make a commitment to get there. I understand that need. And so by having that list, or at least having a rough idea of what you're going to run into, you can start planning on when you're going to tackle those things. But that is actually a really good call out for anybody going through the enterprise. Is especially for our teams recently have really stepped this up. You can't get a PO paid if you haven't gone to the security team to get your vendor approved. So good luck. You can onboard a product, but you're going to have trouble when you go to finance, right? So a lot of companies will put that in that place to ensure that things don't slip through. And if we don't do that review, we can find ourselves on the wrong side of a regulatory or a place where we said, here is our tested vendor list, right? If we suddenly start introducing a new one and we haven't done the same review, we can find ourselves on the wrong side of a regulator as well.
Wow. Is there an open source version of such a list that you've heard of
That's a good
anywhere?
question. I would imagine that you could find one with some basic.
What do you call it? What would they search on?
Yeah, so one, okay, so the NIST framework was mentioned earlier by the gentleman over here. But the NIST cybersecurity framework is publicly available. There's a whole, because your tax dollars pay for it, there's a whole series of publications from NIST actually around security. And there are a few kind of key ones that point to general set of security controls that most regulatory regimes will map to. So I would first call out the NIST cybersecurity framework, CSF, which which in the first, not the first version, but kind of the precursor to that is the 800-53 special publication from NIST. It's unfortunately a number that many of us security people know well. So.
Yeah, and I think if you search for vendor security requirements or something along those lines, you'll find plenty of examples of this.
Yeah.
But what I would say is those lists are extremely exhaustive.
Yes.
And that
It's about 300 questions.
After the target rate.
Right. There's 300 controls, which have paragraphs and paragraphs and details and this.
Yeah.
So I like that Ben has the same practice, and I'm glad to hear that other folks will kind of, including us, will basically hand that questionnaire out to people we're working with and interested in. Because if my team is or my company, if we're gonna buy something from somebody, we want to make sure that they at least are aware of this thing we're gonna ask them for. It's not like a test where you have to walk into the room and answer all the questions right, and you need to know all the we'll give you we'll give you the questions ahead of time, so to speak. So there's nothing wrong with that, and anybody you might work with who has a security questionnaire, they should be able to do the exact same thing. So, but kind of part of the answer to the question too is that unfortunately, you have to answer these things. You probably will have to answer these things different for each company, but they're all basically the same.
It's pretty much the
right?
same.
Some of them will be 10 questions long, some of them will be 100, some of them will be longer, but they're basically, the more substantial ones are basically the same as everybody else's.
Yeah, and once you've gotten through that process efficiently, you will find that suddenly you've mapped to some of the lower level certifications. You're basically doing everything that's there already, because the larger companies are holding you accountable to those things already, because they are accountable to them. So, but I definitely think that piece is often missed especially when you sell to more mature companies. If you kind of start with the question of and I go back to the failure scenario a lot, what am I providing and what happens when that fails and what is the impact to my customer? That's going to answer a lot of the questions that they're going to bring to you ahead of time.
Good question. One more? Go ahead.
How about cyber insurance? Do you guys, I see a big trend going there. I heard Facebook CISO saying that they're going to spend equal amount of dollars on cyber insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something?
Yeah, so I'll go first, and feel free to
Sure.
Answer as much or as little as you want. But we absolutely retain that kind of insurance. We're absolutely looking at increasing it. Dollars I'll have to retain, numbers and amounts and things like that. But I think what's more interesting about that question than other people may not realize is what burden will be placed on our company depending on what kind of premium, what kind of coverage we're asking for, or premium, or this or that. Right now, there's very little, because there's very little actuarial data around all that.
Exactly. How do you evaluate the risk?
I have no idea how they're doing it. And to be honest with you, I really don't. And I'm really curious when the other shoe's gonna drop for the insurance companies who are playing in that space. But at some point, there's gonna be enough proof in the market that they'll have actuarial data to calculate against. Right now, they have very little, and so they're making guesses. And so every year, honestly, the premiums go up and the amount of coverage goes down. And so what's becoming interesting is what our insurance companies,
Are the premiums going up?
Oh, absolutely, because there's more and more crap happening, right? There's more breaches, there's more liability, there's more, absolutely. So we're having to pay more for less coverage, right? So we want to increase our coverage, we're paying a lot more. But what is not yet really happening is our insurance companies requiring us as a company to attest what level of security we have. Does that kind of make sense, right? So nobody is yet really asking us how good our security team is. They're kind of just asking us basic questions. Do you have a security team? Do you have this? Do you have that? Some basic stuff. That's going to change.
So you get a safe driver discount.
Yeah. It's just a matter of time. There is no safe driver discount, but there absolutely is going to be. Absolutely is going to be.
Yeah. So you cannot negotiate with them, saying.
Oh, you can negotiate with anybody, but I'm not doing that negotiation. I'm not in the room.
Okay.
But my understanding from boss and boss's boss is that that negotiation is getting harder, and that that level of discourse is getting more and more technical and more interesting, depending on who you are.
So what's interesting from our perspective is our liability is often baked into our contracts directly, right? If you lose our data, what is the maximum liability? And the number of people who want unlimited liability increases every year, right? So But when you meant the cyber insurance thing, actually came to mind when you were mentioning minimal viable
Yeah.
security thing.
Yeah.
Because at some point, I think your minimum viable security posture will be what you can have to get cyber insurance, right? There will be a baseline criteria. And from a startup, to bring this back to the startup conversation, I have talked to, probably almost 3 years ago, a company who was pitching their solutions to insurance companies to say, hey, if your customers have this, their risk goes down. So, you know, attach this to your policy as a checkbox, and then every customer who has it, you know that they're doing X, and you know they're doing it competently because we're insuring that, and therefore their risk is lower. And the cost of our X is somehow, they've done that math to make it a value proposition. And I think that is actually a terribly interesting, but, you know, somewhat, from my perspective, sneaky way to get your product in the door, is to say, hey, the only way you can get the discounted rate is if you have my blinky light box on your network, you know, because then I'll know you're secure, right?
This kind of thing was most recently done with by FireEye, in working with the federal government and saying, hey, this is like the first kind of certified security product or whatever for, I don't remember what the terminology was, but some of this is starting to happen in terms of the big players going to the bigger buyers and saying, you know, make sure that your agencies or your customers or whatever buy our product because then they'll be safe.
Right. Yeah, and I think that will get verticalized. So I think that there won't be general cybersecurity insurance that is, for, you know, after a certain size, you will have to go to someone who knows your industry. So, or they're going to have to develop industry expertise for everyone, because my security posture, I would imagine, is so dramatically different, and it's company to company. And the reason it's so hard is because there is no like drop-in solution. So like the solution to solving boxes, corporate box, right? The person who hands out laptops and does paychecks, that one is a kind of a common problem. But I have this super customized cloud product that exists in one location, there's one set of code for, and there are no drop-in products that are just going to magically work with that. And so a lot of startup conversations that kind of don't go as swimmingly as one would expect is they're really focused on that corporate problem. And that one, to me, is not my biggest problem. It's this giant unknown that I have no tools for, that I have to do a lot of custom work for. And so not always focused on like trying to solve that corporate side.
Thanks. Good discussion. Thanks everybody for coming out. I hope you found the session both interesting and informative. I really want to thank Ben and Philip for coming in. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you guys again. Stick around if you have a couple more questions, to the extent you guys have 5 more minutes maybe. Stick around.
Yeah, we're switching to another event pretty soon. So.
All right, so we only have a few more minutes for the room, so and then we'll maybe ask you guys to slip out to the lobby.
We're a customer. Hear a lot of things you said.
Yeah.
How are you, Aaron? Good to see you. Hi, Gordon at capitalfactory.com.
Yeah, cool.
Gordon at Capital.
Yeah. All right. Do you know?
I used to train in the Army, the Air Force.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to talk to you about like the so we need access to
Yeah, that'd be great.
we actually are working on
If you're a customer vendor, how do you spell that?
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. It's the only way to grant. And so rather than tailoring that questionnaire every time to a vendor, having that type of form, say, hey, we're introducing a baseline. You can say it's not even good. Okay. Just tell us what you have. And so a lot of people start with.
Okay. Great. Reach out to me and
Do you have a product in the market you get noticed, or working on it?
And at some point you'll get to the point where, okay, now I know just what I get minimum, and every time you go to the contract.
Yeah, I got you.
Of course. And so you don't need to.
So we know we'll meet. Let's
Besides,
talk.
like, okay, let's get some.
Hi, Phil Byron.
Brass deal already.
Aaron, it's a pleasure. Absolutely.
Appreciate y'all's time.
My name is Ravi.
Absolutely, please do. Please do. Look forward to talking. Thanks, man. Good to meet you.
Hey, Phil.
Hi.
Eric Sullivan.
Pleasure to meet you, Eric.
Great. People that showed up.
Okay, cool. I hope we were able to kind of give Okay, good. Please do. Please do, yeah.
Right. Especially with security right now, we're on the radar for one of the startups,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's do my we can tell you the first one. My 9-year-old son.
Have you done that? So have you met JD?
Absolutely convinced that he's going to be the first person on his spaceship.
Yeah, okay.
He doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to work for NASA. He doesn't want to work for SpaceX. He doesn't want to work for anybody. His company, his spaceship. He's going to be the first person on Mars. I know. That's what I tried to tell him, but no, he is convinced, and so Eric is going to meet you. Please do. Look forward to it. Thanks. I've heard of you guys, so
you didn't apply for the. You haven't applied yet.
Good. Okay. Thanks.
And I'm like, oh, it's 4:30. I'll take it off. Okay, that's what I've been waiting for.
Hi, I'm Phil.
I'm Kelly.
Pleasure to meet you, Kelly.
So I failed to decide you haven't applied or how bad. What I'll do is I'll let you know since I'm now coming down here. We grab some coffee. I can answer more questions for you. We love to get to know startups, before they apply. So it's not just a random, video that we're watching,
So we have kind of some basically some of our customers are requiring that we certify the high trust. Not today, but either next year or the year after. So we're being forced to comply basically by the people that are buying from us. So that's kind of how it's affected. So yeah, we didn't necessarily see an advantage to it. It was never really a market differentiator for us. It's now more of a requirement. You don't just do business.
Yeah, but that's what we're saying too.
You don't hear from me this
We're
week.
actually based on Redwood.
Reach out to me and say, we met.
Yeah.
Something like that. Figure out if you come. Is it work for you to get down? Okay. I'm here 3 or 4 days a week. So we'll figure out. We might just visit in the kitchen or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. So what he mentioned about like the can you push updates, can you react to problems? That's definitely
It's an issue for us.
Hey,
Appreciate you getting involved in this.
Yeah.
I actually just wanted to catch up. So the awesome office.
That's one, and then just two is like really understand what failure
And
is
kind of
like.
help coordinate a lot of the activities. I manage a consultancy here, so all of the kind of customer facing resources that
Hey, it's doing weird things. Hey, it's here, it's like actually connected to you, what do you want access to? Right, like
so I've already been talking to a few folks that
and that stuff. When you have access to that, you can tell other devices.
So I'm always curious.
You're telling them to do
at some point about
maybe what you didn't expect, right?
I think one of the challenges we have this year for following us now is that we're trying to
just out of the box brainstorming that.
invest in physical
Regularly coming back and saying, do we have new ones that we haven't thought of? Do we add any features that bring the new failures? Understanding what those are,
mentorship opportunities,
having them ideally handled gracefully, or at minimum fail in a way that
so I'm trying to look for opportunities for you guys. Yes, we can be engaged, but we can also bring our resources in. So
depends on a lot of these
Yeah, I
coaches
work
don't apply everything.
so really difficult all day in Chelsea.
Yep, I have that Chelsea as well.
So I consult a lot of
You
You hadn't met him?
No, actually, in person.